The wind moved slow over the wide valley that morning, carrying the smell of pine, dust, and the fading smoke of a dying campfire. Dawn had just begun to rise, painting the clouds in shades of gold. Riders from the nearby settlement kept whispering about the stranger who had arrived the night before. It's a tall Apache warrior with eyes that showed no fear and no hesitation. Folks said he carried a past carved by hardship, loss, and duty, a man shaped by the old American frontier where survival demanded strength, not wishes. Heron stood near the wooden fence that circled the ranch yard. His bare shoulders glowed under the early light, marked with the scars of battles he never bragged about. He had crossed mountains and harsh deserts to come here for one reason. He had paid a high price, more than anyone in these parts could understand, to claim the woman who had changed everything inside him. No one fully knew what he had given, or why he had traveled so far. But whispers spread that an Apache paying such a price meant he was bound to something deeper than tradition. Ayanna had been brought to the ranch only a week earlier. She was tired from long journeys and the heavy weight of uncertainty. Though she had grown up in a small settlement, nothing in her life had prepared her for this moment. She sat quietly near the round corral, her hands folded on her lap, her dark hair falling soft around her face as she tried to understand the choice that had been made for her. She was known for her calm spirit, yet inside she felt the ground was shifting, as if the whole world had decided to pull her in a direction she'd never expected. She had heard the words spoken by the Apache to the ranch owner the night before. His voice had been steady, deep, and without tremble. He said, "I paid a high price to make her my wife and be by her side each day, and I dream of a big family." The ranch owner, a man named Thorn, had watched Heron with a sharp eye, trying to judge if he meant what he said, or if he was simply another drifter making bold claims. But Heron did not sway. He spoke with the weight of a man who knew loss, knew loneliness, and knew what it meant to fight for something real. Ayanna had been told she would be safe in this marriage. Everyone kept reminding her that Heron had shown honor in every choice he made. But fear was stubborn, and she felt it clinging to her ribs. She did not know if she was ready to be anyone's wife. She did not know what kind of life waited for her, or what dreams this Apache held inside his heart. All she knew was that Heron looked at her as if the world had finally given him a reason to breathe. Heron walked toward her now, his steps slow, steady, respectful. He did not reach for her, or push himself into her space. He simply stood near her and let the quiet settle between them. The ranch hands pretended not to watch, but every single one of them kept glancing over, curious how an Apache man and a young woman who barely knew him were supposed to become husband and wife. The frontier was a place of wild stories, but this one felt different. It felt personal, and it felt like something could go wrong at any moment. Ayanna lifted her gaze toward him. She noticed the way the morning light touched his face, making the angles of his jaw sharper, the lines around his eyes deeper. He looked like a man who had lived through more nights than he cared to count. She wondered what price he had paid. She wondered if his promise of a big family was something he truly believed in, or something he hoped would heal old wounds. She wanted to ask, but her voice felt locked inside. Heron studied her quietly. He had decided long ago that if he ever found a woman whose presence softened the storms inside him, he would protect her with everything he had. He had not expected it to be her. The first time he saw Ayanna, she stood beside a broken wagon with dust on her cheeks and stubborn courage in her eyes. He felt something shift inside him then, something he had never felt before. It was strange and powerful, like recognizing a path he did not know he had been meant to follow. He finally spoke, his voice calm. "You do not have to fear me. I chose this path because I believe in it. I believe in us." She looked down, unsure if she could believe anything yet. The world had not always been kind to her. Promises had failed her before. But there was something steady in his tone, something that reached past her fear. Before she could answer, Thorn called out from the porch, "Trouble is coming our way." Ayanna felt her stomach drop. Thorn never used that tone unless he meant it. Heron turned his head slightly, his senses sharp. Dust rose in the distance, a trail cutting across the valley floor. Someone was riding hard toward the ranch. Someone who carried urgency, maybe anger, maybe danger. Ayanna felt her pulse rise. Heron stepped forward, placing himself between her and whatever was coming. He didn't touch her, but she felt his protection wrap around her like a shield. The riders approached fast, their silhouettes growing clearer as the sun lifted higher. Thorn stepped down from the porch with his rifle slung over his shoulder, his jaw tight. Ayanna whispered, "Who are they?" Heron did not answer right away. He watched the approaching riders with the calmness of a man who had faced danger more times than he could count. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but firm. "People who think they have a claim on you. People who do not want this marriage to happen." Her breath caught. She felt the earth shift beneath her again, heavier than before. She did not know who he meant. She did not know what they wanted. But she knew enough to understand that this moment could decide everything. The riders slowed as they reached the fence line, dust falling away to reveal their faces. Ayanna recognized one of them and froze. Heron noticed the fear in her eyes and stepped closer, his presence solid like a wall between her and the men who had come. Thorn gripped his rifle. Heron squared his shoulders. Ayanna felt her heart pounding so loud she could hear it in her ears. The leader of the riders leaned forward in his saddle, his stare fixed on Ayanna like she belonged to him. His voice cut through the air, sharp and unwelcome. "She is not his wife yet." Ayanna felt her skin grow cold. Heron did not move, did not blink. The leader narrowed his eyes and added with quiet threat, "And we are here to make sure she never will be." Ayanna's breath trembled. The sun rose higher. The valley fell silent. And the moment stretched tight with tension that could snap at any second. The story would not wait. Something was about to break, and nothing would ever be the same. The valley stayed painfully silent as the riders stopped at the fence line. Even the horses seemed to sense the weight of what hung between the two sides. Ayanna kept her breath trapped inside her chest, afraid that even the sound of it would tilt everything toward danger. Heron stood firm in front of her, his stance solid, his eyes never leaving the man who had spoken with such cold claim. Thorn shifted near the porch, his hand close to his rifle, but not yet raised. No one wanted to move first. No one wanted to start something they could not take back. The leader on the horse looked older than Ayanna remembered. Deep lines marked his forehead as if anger had been living there for years. His jaw was locked tight and his eyes burned with something between pride and wounded ego. His name was Corvan, a man known through these lands for holding grudges longer than storms and carrying them like badges of honor. Ayanna had seen that look before, back when her family still lived near his settlement. He had always been a man who believed everything should bend to his will. She had never trusted him, never liked the way he talked about people as if they were possessions, especially women. Heron watched him closely. He could read men faster than most. Corvan rode with 3 others, each one thick-armed and carrying old grudges on their faces. These were not men seeking peace. They had come with intention, and that intention was trouble. Heron shifted slightly, not enough to draw attention, but enough to make sure Ayanna stayed behind the shield of his body. Corvan finally spoke again. His voice was sharp, carrying across the yard. "She was promised to my settlement months ago. That agreement is not broken because an Apache walked in with stories and coin." Heron's eyes narrowed, but he held his calm. "I did not take her. I came openly. I offered honor." "Not force," Corvan scoffed. "Honor, that word from Anne. Apache carries no meaning here." Ayanna felt something sting inside her chest. She glanced at Heron, expecting anger, but he did not react. He let the insult fall as if it could not touch him. That quiet restraint frightened her more than if he had shown rage. It meant he understood the stakes. It meant he knew how fragile this moment was. Thorn finally stepped forward, his voice steady. "Your settlement does not decide everything, Corvan. The girl's future is not yours to bargain like cattle. You know that." Corvan's jaw twitched. "She has obligations." Ayanna felt her stomach twist. She knew exactly what he meant by obligations. Her parents had died last winter, and during the confusion and grief, Corvan had stepped in, offering help. But help from him was never free. He had hinted that she owed him work or loyalty, or worse. She had refused each time, but his grip only grew tighter. Thorn had known of her troubles, which was why he had taken her in. And it was during that stay at the ranch that Heron had arrived. She remembered the night clearly. Heron had walked into the ranch yard with his quiet strength, offering work in exchange for shelter. The ranch hands had been wary at first, but Heron's respectful ways won them over. Ayanna had seen him help fix broken saddles, carry heavy loads without complaint, and watch the ranch with the steady awareness of a man used to danger. He had spoken little, but each time he glanced at her, she felt something shift, something she couldn't explain. It was Heron who later approached Thorn with the offer that shocked everyone. An offer to take Ayanna as his wife and give her a life far from the reach of men like Corvin. Corvin leaned forward in the saddle. "The coin you brought means nothing. The agreement her family made stays in place until I say otherwise." Heron kept his voice strong but level. "She is not a thing you own. She chooses her path." Corvin's eyes flashed with anger. "You think she chose you?" Ayanna's heart rattled in her chest. She had not been given time to think about anything. Everything had moved too fast. Her parents gone. Corvin circling her like a hawk. Thorn offering safety. Then Heron stepping in with a promise she barely understood. She did not know if she chose him. She did not know if she chose anything. But she knew one thing. She did not want Corvin deciding her future. Corvin stared at her now, waiting for her reaction. Ayanna lowered her gaze, fear tightening her throat. Corvin smirked, taking her silence as proof that she stood with him. Heron noticed immediately. "She does not speak out of fear of you, not loyalty." Corvin snapped back. "She speaks when I ask her to." Heron took a slow breath, his patience thinning. "Then ask her." The air tightened. Corvin's jaw clenched. He did not ask, because deep inside he feared the answer would not favor him. Silence pressed down heavy between them. Thorn stepped in again. "You should leave, Corvin. This ranch is not yours to command. Whatever business you think you have here ends now." Corvin looked around the ranch yard, his eyes cold and calculating. Then he leaned back in his saddle. "This is not over. Not until she is where she belongs." Ayanna flinched. Heron stepped closer to her, his presence strong and protective. Corvin watched the small movement, and his expression darkened. He nodded to his men. They turned their horses, hooves kicking up dust. As they rode off, Corvin looked over his shoulder one last time. "I warned you. She will come back with me, one way or another." When the riders disappeared beyond the ridge, the ranch yard finally exhaled. Ayanna's knees trembled. Heron turned to her carefully, not wanting to frighten her further. "Are you harmed?" She shook her head, but her voice felt trapped. Thorn came closer. "You need to stay inside for now. Those men will not let this go." Ayanna felt the weight of truth in his words. Corvin was not finished. His pride would not allow it. And the frontier had its own laws, many unwritten, many feared. Heron studied her with concern. "There is more to this story. Tell me what ties he believes he has on you." Ayanna hesitated. She felt shame rise, though she knew it was not hers to carry. She stepped back, her voice soft. "When my parents died, he gave food to my family for the burial. He offered shelter for a night. He said it was nothing. But later he claimed it was a debt." Heron listened without judgment, she added. "He said that debt meant I owed him my obedience, that I should live in his settlement and work for him. And if I refused, I was ungrateful." Thorn shook his head with disgust. "Corvin twists every kindness into a chain." Heron's jaw tightened. "Did you ever accept a promise of marriage with him?" Her eyes widened. "No, never. I told him I wanted to live freely. He said freedom was for people who earned it." Heron lowered his voice. "He has no right over your life. Not by debt. Not by lies." Ayanna felt tears prick at the corner of her eyes, not from sadness, but from the strange mix of fear and relief. For the first time, she felt someone believed her fully. Thorn placed a hand on his belt. "I know Corvin's type. He'll come back with more men next time, and he won't pretend to negotiate." Heron looked out across the wide valley. The sun was higher now, lighting up the land, but doing nothing to ease the tension. Corvin had power in numbers. Heron had strength in spirit, but sometimes that was not enough. Ayanna felt the truth of that. As the wind shifted, carrying the distant sound of crows, Ayanna felt a chill. The frontier was unforgiving. Kindness was rare. Safety was temporary. And peace often had to be fought for. Heron turned back to her, his eyes filled with steady promise. I paid a high price to protect you. I will not let him take what is not his. Ayanna swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. What if he brings more men? What if he brings the law? Heron held her gaze, unflinching. Then we stand our ground together. But before she could answer, Thorn lifted his hand toward the far ridge smoke. Ayana. Turned and saw it rising in a thin dark line. Heron's eyes hardened. Corvin was already sending a message. Something had begun, and none of them knew how far it would go. Smoke rose in a thin, dark line against the pale sky, drifting upward as if carrying a warning across the valley. Ayanna felt her breath catch the moment she saw it. Something about the shape of the smoke, the steady column rising without break, made her skin prickle. Thorn cursed under his breath and started toward the porch steps, his boots striking the wood with a heavy beat. Heron watched the rising smoke with the same calm he used when facing storms. A calm that came not from comfort, but from experience. Ayanna tried to steady her voice. Is that Corvin's doing? Thorn nodded. He lit something on the far ridge. It might be a sign to his men, or a threat to us. Heron narrowed his eyes. Corvin wants fear to do half his work. Ayanna stood behind Heron, her fingers curling against her skirt. She felt the tension in the air, tightening again. Every part of her wished this trouble would end before it began. But the frontier did not bend for wishes. Trouble here grew roots fast, especially when wounded pride was mixed with power. Heron took a step forward to get a better look. Smoke like that could mean a message to distant riders. It could mean a call for support from his settlement. It could also mean Corvin was stirring up others with stories of betrayal or threats that never happened. And if he convinced enough people, the number of riders coming back could double or triple. Thorn crossed his arms. He's gathering allies. Men who owe him favors. Men who want to feel strong by standing behind someone louder than they are. Ayanna felt a hollow ache growing inside her. The land around them seemed to open, too vulnerable. The ranch was sturdy, but not fortified. There were barns, sheds, open fields and fences that wouldn't hold against a determined group. She tried to speak, but her voice betrayed her worry. What will he do next? Heron looked at her with steady eyes. He will test us. Push to see how far we bend. He wants to break your will before he tries to break anything else. Ayanna swallowed hard. Fear was settling in her bones, but there was something else too. A spark of defiance she did not know she carried. Corvin had spent years twisting people's lives under the weight of his demands. She had seen him shame widows, pressure young men, convince whole families that survival meant obedience to him. She had always known he was dangerous even when he smiled. Thorn called one of the ranch hands from the barn. Get the gates locked and bring the dogs in. We keep everyone close today. The hand nodded and ran off. Ayanna watched him go, then turned back to the smoke rising in the distance. She wondered how many people would stand with Corvin simply because they feared standing against him. The thought made her chest tighten. Heron stepped closer to her. You are not alone. You are not going back to him. She nodded, though part of her still worried that the world around her might force her into choices she never wanted. The morning dragged into late daylight, heavy with restless silence. Every task on the ranch was done with one eye on the far ridge. The smoke faded eventually, but its meaning stayed. Even the animals sensed the tension. Horses paced in their stalls. Dogs barked at the slightest sound. Ayanna found herself inside the main house, helping Thorn's sister Mara prepare food. Mara was a strong woman with sharp eyes, always knowing more than she let on. She had watched the riders earlier with a stiff jaw, and now chopped vegetables with the same. Tight tension. Mara finally spoke. Corvin's been stirring trouble for years. Folks go along with him because they don't want to be on his bad side. But this is different. He won't let this marriage business rest easy. Ayana hesitated. I never gave him a promise. Why won't he leave me? Mara sighed. Because you didn't want him? Some men take rejection like a wound they must avenge. Ayana looked down at her hands. She had never realized refusing someone's claim could turn into something this dangerous. Mara rested a hand on her shoulder briefly. Don't blame yourself. Corvin's ways were wrong long before you said no. Outside, Heron and Thorn inspected the fences for weak spots. Thorn paced the perimeter, his boots kicking dust in small clouds. Heron walked with the quiet awareness of a hunter, checking shadows, distant trees, and even the wind direction. He had lived through ambushes and raids. He knew what signs to watch for. And he knew what fear was doing to Ayana, even if she tried to hide it. As the sun began to dip low, casting long shadows across the ranch, Heron returned to the porch. Ayana stepped outside, wiping her hands on her apron. He studied her face, reading the worry that lingered there. You are stronger than you know. Ayana felt warmth rise to her cheeks. She looked away, unsure how to answer. Heron had a way of seeing past the surface. It unsettled her and comforted her at the same time. Before she could respond, a faint sound echoed through the trees. Hooves, slow, distant, but unmistakable. Thorn stiffened immediately. Mara stepped outside too, holding a lantern. Ayana moved behind Heron without thinking. The hooves grew louder, but only one rider approached this time. When he emerged from the trees, the ranch hands recognized him. It was Rowan, a young man from a nearby homestead. He was timid by nature, not the kind of person who sought conflict. The fact that he came riding in at dusk meant something serious was happening. Rowan stopped near the porch, breathing hard. Thorn stepped forward. What happened? Rowan swallowed. He lit 2 more fires, one on the east ridge and one near the creek. He's sending messages. He's telling settlements you stole a woman from him. Ayana felt her heart drop. Heron stood firm. Lies travel fast when people want to believe them. Rowan nodded. Folks are getting uneasy. He's saying you took her against her will. That he's coming to reclaim what's his. Ayana's voice cracked. That's not true. Rowan looked at her gently. But people fear Corvin more than they care about what's real. Thorn clenched his jaw. How many does he have with him now? Rowan shook his head. Hard to tell. But he's gathering anyone who'll listen. And he's telling them to meet at his settlement by dawn. Ayana felt the air grow thin. Dawn. That meant Corvin wasn't waiting. He was building something tonight. Planning something bigger. And whatever it was, it involved her. Heron stepped down from the porch. Rowan, you should head home and keep your family safe. Rowan hesitated. If I hear more, I'll come back. No. Thorn shook his head. You stay out of this. Corvin will crush anyone in his way. Rowan lowered his gaze. Yes. Then rode off into the darkening woods. Ayana looked at Heron, feeling fear and guilt creeping together. He is doing all this because of me. Heron shook his head. He is doing this because he is a man who cannot stand losing power. Ayana felt her eyes sting. I don't want anyone hurt because of me. Heron's voice softened. People hurt because of men like Corvin, not because of you. Night settled over the valley. Lanterns lit the ranch yard. Dogs paced restlessly along the fence. The ranch hands took turns keeping watch. Thorn stayed awake near the porch, and Mara kept checking the windows, as if expecting someone to appear at any moment. Ayana tried to sleep, but her thoughts were tangled. Every sound felt sharper. Every gust of wind felt like footsteps. When she finally stepped outside for air, she found Heron sitting near the barn, sharpening a blade with slow, controlled motions. She approached quietly. You are not resting. Heron lifted his eyes. I rest when the land rests. Ayana sat beside him, the cool night air brushing her cheeks. After a long silence, she whispered, Do you regret coming here for me? Heron paused. His expression softened. No. But I regret that danger follows you because of another man's pride. Ayanna looked down at her hands again. Heron leaned closer, just enough for his voice to lower. Tell me what scares you most. Not Corvin. Not his menu. Ayanna took a breath. I fear being trapped. I fear losing the little freedom I have left. And I fear choosing wrong and hurting the people who are trying to protect me. Heron nodded slowly. Fear is not weakness. It means you understand the cost of what is coming. She met his gaze. What is coming? Heron's voice held a quiet truth. A storm made not of wind and rain, but of men who believe they deserve what they are denied. Ayanna shivered. From the far ridge, a wolf howled long and low. Heron looked toward the dark horizon. The storm had already begun. Night held the valley tight, stretching each hour longer than the last. The ranch felt like it had shrunk, its wide-open lands suddenly too small to keep danger out. Lanterns flickered along the porch, and the dogs paced without resting, their ears twitching at every faint sound. No one slept. Even the wind moved with caution, brushing against the wooden walls, as if warning the people inside to stay sharp. Ayanna stood near the window, her fingers resting lightly on the frame. She watched the dark ridge where Corvin's fires had burned earlier. Nothing moved there now, but that silence only made her feel more uneasy. She could sense the storm Heron had spoken of, a storm built from stubborn pride and men hungry for control. Behind her, Heron stepped into the room, quiet as always. His presence felt steady, like a mountain standing against a coming wave. She didn't turn right away, but he knew she sensed him. He had learned her every slight movement over the past days, just as she had learned the calm strength behind each of his steps. You should try to rest, he said gently. I cannot, she whispered. Not with everything pressing down like this. Heron stood beside her, looking out into the night. He did not try to force comfort. He let the truth sit between them, honest and sharp. He had lived through nights like this before, nights where enemies gathered strength in the distance while silence tried to choke out hope. But this time was different. This time, the danger was aimed at someone he vowed to protect. Ayanna finally turned toward him. Heron, if Corvin gathers more men by dawn, he will not come here to talk. You know that? Heron nodded. I know. Her voice tightened. And Thorn, Mara, the ranch hands? They are all at risk because of me. Heron met her gaze, his eyes steady. They stand with you by choice. And I stand with you by promise. Ayanna dropped her eyes. The weight of everything felt too heavy to hold. She wanted to be brave, but bravery felt thin in the face of Corvin's growing force. Heron lifted her chin gently with 2 fingers, just enough for her eyes to meet his again. You are not a burden. You did not bring this storm. Corvin did. Ayanna drew in a trembling breath. Heron let his hand fall back to his side, careful, respectful. He had never crossed the space she wasn't ready for. She noticed that every day, and even now, steadied her heart in a way she didn't expect. Before she could answer, Thorn knocked on the open door frame. Both turned. Thorn looked tired, shadows deep under his eyes. We have trouble, he said quietly. Ayanna's stomach dropped. Heron stepped forward. What happened? Thorn motioned for them to follow. They moved outside into the cold night air. 2 ranch hands stood near the fence line, lanterns raised high. In the distance, a small shape lay on the ground. Ayanna moved closer, fear gripping her. When she reached it, she gasped. A dead falcon lay in the dust, an arrow pinned through one wing. A strip of red cloth tied to the arrow shaft whipped in the wind. Heron's jaw tightened. A warning. Thorn nodded grimly. Corvin's message, he's letting us know he's close and watching. Ayanna felt her heartbeat rise painfully against her ribs. Mara joined them, shaking her head. He's taunting us. Trying to break our nerves before sunrise, Heron crouched beside the falcon, inspecting the arrow. The feather burned on the shaft, the way it was aimed. He knew Corvin's men well enough. This wasn't from far off. Someone had been close, too close for comfort, which meant the ranch had been under silent watch for hours. Thorn looked around the dark tree line. He's testing our guard. He wants us restless, tired. Ayana's voice cracked. What will he do next? Heron rose slowly. The next move will not be quiet. They returned to the main yard, but the tension did not leave. Lanterns burned brighter, shadows stretched longer, and the dogs refused to settle. The whole ranch pulsed with unease. As the hours dragged past midnight, the cold deepened. The ranch hands rotated watch, their silhouettes moving on the ridge and near the barns. Thorn leaned against a post, rifle across his lap. Mara brewed bitter tea to keep everyone alert. Ayana sat near the fire pit, staring into the flames. Heron knelt beside her, sharpening another blade with controlled strokes. She listened to the soft scrape of metal, finding small comfort in its rhythm. After a long silence, Ayana spoke. Heron, if something happens to you because of me, I don't know if I could live with that. Heron paused. He set the blade aside gently. Ayana, danger finds every man in different ways. This is one I choose to face. Not for obligation. For purpose, she lifted her eyes. Heron stayed close, but not touching. Knowing she needed breath and reassurance both, your life should not be tangled in mine, she whispered. He shook his head. My life was wandering without direction long before I came here. You did not trap me. You grounded me. Ayana felt warmth rise in her chest. She swallowed hard, unsure how to answer, before she could try. A distant crack broke the air, a branch snapping. Heron stood instantly. Thorn rushed from the porch. The ranch hands tensed, gripping their guns and lanterns. Ayana rose, heart pounding. Heron raised his hand, signaling silence. He listened, eyes fixed on the dark trees. Another faint sound followed, then another, slow, intentional footsteps. Heron whispered without looking at her. Stay behind me, Ayana obeyed, every muscle taut. The footsteps grew clearer, crunching softly through dry leaves. Thorn moved to Heron's side, rifle ready, but not raised. Mara stepped out with a lantern. Eyes narrowed, the trees parted. A tall figure stepped into the light. Ayana gasped softly. It wasn't Corvin, it was an older man with graying hair. Wrapped in a worn coat, his face drawn with fear and exhaustion. He held both hands up to show he carried no weapon. Heron stepped forward cautiously. Who are you? The man's voice cracked. My name is Calder. I came to warn you. Corvin is gathering men faster than anyone expected. By morning he will have near 20. Thorn swore under his breath. 20. Ayana felt faint. Calder shook his head, panic in his eyes. He told them you stole her. He told them she was promised to him, and you took what was his. Heron's jaw set, and they believed him. They were afraid to question him, Calder said. He threatens anyone who doubts him. He has boys as young as 15 joining just to avoid punishment. Ayana stepped forward despite her fear. Why are you risking being here? If Corvin finds out you warned us, he'll turn on you next. Calder's eyes softened. My daughter once worked under him. When she refused to stay longer, he made life hard for her. I will not let him do the same to another girl. Ayana's throat tightened. Calder continued. He plans to surround this ranch before sunrise. He wants to take her before the law can step in. Heron stepped closer. Did you see where he plans to enter from? Calder nodded. From the East Ridge. He said your defenses there were weak. He already sent 3 men to hide near the creek. Ayana felt her knees weaken. Mara caught her arm to steady her. Heron stood perfectly still, taking in every detail. Thorn looked to him. We don't have enough men to fight 20. Heron did not blink. We will not let her be taken. Ayana felt her heart twist. The fear, the danger, the weight of everything pressed harder than ever. The sky above felt darker, as if even the stars had stepped back to watch. Thorn exhaled sharply. We need a plan. Something fast. Something smart. Heron's voice was low, calm, frighteningly steady. Corvin wants us scared. If we break before dawn, he wins. We hold the ridge. We move the livestock out of harm's way. And and we keep Ayana out of sight. Ayana stepped forward. I don't want to hide while everyone risks their lives. Heron turned to her, his eyes deep with meaning. You are the reason Corvin is coming. That does not make you weak. It means you have more value than he can stand. But value must be protected. Ayana's breath shook. Heron placed a hand over his chest. I gave my word. I paid a high price for a life with you. I will not let him take it. The fire popped softly. Dawn was still hours away. But the weight of morning already pressed against their shoulders. Calder pointed toward the east ridge. His men will move before first light. If you are not prepared, they will surround you. Heron looked out at the darkness, his expression carved with determination. Then we prepare. Ayana felt the world tilt again, but not from fear alone. The tension inside her grew into something fierce, something brave. Heron met her gaze one last time before, walking toward the ridge. The storm of men and pride was coming fast, and the climax of everything they feared was only moments away. The sky was still dark when the first pale streaks of light began to touch the edge of the valley. A cold wind swept across the ranch, bending the tall grass and carrying the sounds of approaching riders from far off. Heron stood on the east ridge before anyone else was awake, his silhouette steady against the dim horizon. He felt the weight of the long night in his bones, yet his spirit held firm. This land had seen storms before, but this was one he had chosen to stand in front of. Not for glory, not for pride, but for Ayana. Ayana joined him minutes later, her shawl wrapped around her shoulders. She stepped quietly, almost afraid to disturb the moment. She knew what dawn meant. It meant Corvin's men would soon gather. It meant the confrontation that had hung over her for weeks would finally arrive. But when she saw Heron there, strong and calm, something inside her loosened. Fear still lived in her chest, but so did hope. He turned toward her, studying her face. You do not have to stand out here. She stepped closer. I will stand with you. Heron looked at her for a long moment, the morning light growing around them. His voice softened. Then you stand beside me, not behind me. Ayana nodded, her heart full with something she could not name. Thorn, Mara, and the ranch hands soon gathered with them, forming a small line of determined faces, each holding a rifle or lantern. They were not soldiers. They were ranchers, workers, and simple folk trying to live quietly. But they had chosen their side. Calder stood with them too, his hands shaking slightly from lack of sleep. He pointed down toward the lower ridge. They'll come from there first. Corvin will want to test your ground. Thorn tightened his grip on his weapon. If they think we'll let them walk in here and take her, they're wrong. Heron looked out toward the valley. He could see the faint movement of dust, the shadowed shapes of riders gathering. The sound of hooves echoed like slow thunder, building toward the ranch. Ayana swallowed hard and moved closer to Heron, who stepped slightly in front of her, not to hide her, but to shield her from the first wave of fear. The riders appeared in a long row, their silhouettes crisp against the rising sun. Corvin led them, his posture straight, his expression cold. His men spread out behind him, nearly 20 in number, just as Calder warned. Corvin stopped his horse at the bottom of the ridge. His voice carried clearly. I gave you all night to think. Bring her out. End this peacefully. No one moved. Heron stepped forward, his stance unbreakable. She is here, and she chooses her own life, not yours. Corvin's smile twisted. You think you can protect her from a debt owed to me? Ayana's voice rose suddenly, surprising even herself. I never owed you anything. My parents owed you nothing. Your kindness was not a chain. Her courage hit Corvin like a blow. His expression snapped from smugness to rage. You speak boldly now, girl, but you forget who fed your family in your darkest hour. Ayana felt the truth burn inside her. You fed us to gain control, not to help. Corvin raised his hand sharply. Enough. Bring her down, or we come up. Heron's voice was calm but strong. You will not cross this ridge, Corvin laughed. You think a handful of ranchers and one Apache can stop 20 men? Step aside now, or suffer for her stubbornness. Thorn finally stepped forward. You brought this trouble here, Corvin. Not her. And not Heron. You made this war out of your pride. Corvin snapped his fingers. 3 riders moved forward, preparing to advance, but Heron raised his hand in one firm motion. And before the riders could charge, a sharp whistle cut the air from behind the barn. A group of ranchers from a nearby settlement stepped forward, armed and ready. They stood with Rowan at the front, his face pale but determined. We heard your lies, Corvin, he shouted, and we know the truth. You will not take her by force. Corvin's eyes widened with shock. You dare stand against me? Rowan's voice trembled, but did not break. My family lived under your threats. Not anymore. These people stand with Heron, and so do we. More figures came from the West Ridge. Calder's extended family, neighbors, workers from smaller homesteads. They had gathered quietly in the night after Rowan spread the warning. They were not here for war. They were here because they believed in fairness, something Corvin had long forgotten. Ayana's eyes filled with tears, but not from fear. People had come for her. People who hardly knew her. People who saw the truth. Corvin's men shifted nervously. Outnumbered. Surrounded. The power that Corvin had relied on for years was slipping from his grip. Corvin turned red with fury. You fools. You forget who built your barns, who fixed your wells, who kept thieves out of your settlements. Calder stepped forward. You helped when it suited you, and punished us when it didn't. We won't bow anymore. Heron took one final step, his presence towering in the golden morning light. Corvin, this land is tired of your threats. Leave now. Walk away before your pride destroys you. Corvin looked around desperately, searching for loyalty that was no longer there. One by one, his men lowered their weapons. Their eyes dropped. Some backed their horses away, abandoning him. Corvin felt his world collapse. He glared at Ayana with pure venom, but there was no power left in it. She stood strong beside Heron, no longer hiding. No longer afraid? You will regret this, he spat. Heron answered without anger. There's nothing here for you anymore. Corvin yanked his horse around and kicked hard, riding away across the valley, his men scattering behind him like leaves chased by the wind. Silence fell over the ridge. Ayana felt her knees weaken, but before she could fall, Heron caught her gently. His arms wrapped around her, steady as the earth. It's over, he whispered. She let herself breathe for the first time in days. Tears fell freely, carrying away the fear that had lived inside her for so long. Around them, the ranchers began to relax. Thorn let out a long breath. Mara wiped her eyes with the corner of her apron. Rowan smiled shakily. Calder bowed his head, relieved. Ayana looked up at Heron, her voice trembling. You protected me when you didn't have to. Heron shook his head. I chose to, and I will choose you every day from here on. Her heart swelled with something warm and full. For the first time in her life, she felt safe. Not because someone claimed to own her, but because someone valued her. The crowd slowly began to return to their homes and chores. Leaving Heron and Ayana at the top of the ridge, the sun climbed higher, washing the valley in gold. A new beginning stretched out before them. Ayana placed her hand over Heron's chest, feeling the steady beat beneath. I want the life you dreamed of, she whispered. A life of peace. A life where we build our own family. Heron's breath eased, his eyes softening with deep emotion. Then it begins today. They walked back toward the ranch together, the air lighter now, the shadows gone. Thorn greeted them with a nod of approval. Mara hugged Ayana tight, whispering that she deserved happiness, real happiness. The ranch came alive again. The animals calmed. The dogs rested. The land seemed to exhale with relief. Heron and Ayana stood hand in hand, the future open before them. Their story had been shaped by danger, but now it turned toward hope, toward healing, toward a home built on respect, courage, and truth, and as the morning sun warmed their faces, Ayana knew her life had finally shifted into a place where she could breathe freely. Heron kept his promise. She kept her choice. And together, they would build the large, loving family he had dreamed of. The valley, once heavy with fear, now held the promise of peace and their new beginning.